that that it didn't go through.
Amazing. Yeah.
Crazy.
But now they face the Saints, and this is gonna be a challenge. They they played each other what, about 5 weeks ago, and it was 48-7. Wow.
Yeah.
But I mean that it could have been, what was it, November 18th. It could have been 5 years ago when you talk about NFL seasons. So many things happen. I mean, you have a completely different quarterback.
Absolutely.
So, and I think that's actually a good thing when teams play each other twice in a year. Usually, the team that loses learns a lot about what not to do, and that helps them greatly. How do you think the Eagles are going to handle the Saints this time?
That is an interesting question. I think it's on paper, kind of one of the worst matchups. Like you mentioned, the game we had earlier in the season, this is probably the last team we want to be facing. But having said that, and you just touched on it, it's a completely different team. It's a totally different quarterback, and the whole team's playing in a different way than they were when the teams matched up earlier in the season. And I think a part of that, if you look back at that Saints game, that was right in the middle of a lot of turmoil with the secondary and the injuries going on there. So naturally, a Hall of Fame quarterback like Drew Brees is going to carve them up, like a pumpkin, and have a field day. And I guess one of the, and also along with the fact that, like you said, they will be able to look at the film and see what they did wrong. The other side of that, and I give Jim Schwartz credit, especially going back to last week and even Week 17 against the Redskins. He's coached these guys up, these kind of newer secondary players like Avonte Maddox and LeBlanc and Trey Sullivan. Rasul Douglas has played really well. So these guys that probably a lot of Eagles fans didn't even know the names of, a month ago, have had big plays and a big impact in the last couple weeks. So, it's a stretch to say they'll be able to, put a stop or contain or change the outcome of the game against Drew Brees. But perhaps, there's a hope that one of them makes a big play, a pick six, or even just a couple, force a turnover. It's a possibility. And when you combine that with the way the front seven's been playing, and again, looking just back a week to last week against the Bears, that defense held up and competed and won the game essentially against the best defense in the NFL. So, I know a lot wasn't necessarily expected of Trubinsky, and maybe the Bears' offense isn't top notch, but that was a defensive game, and our defense did its job and came up with the big stops at the right time. So there is that. There's the hope that the secondary and that the front seven is much improved from what it was in that game. I think that's the biggest factor that I'm holding on to is reason to be optimistic. At the very least, that the Eagles will cover the spread and that it won't be a blowout. And, who knows? Who knows what will happen? Because then you got to throw in the factor, again, of Nick Foles and just him continuing to show up in big games and just basically outplay all expectations. So there's always that as well.
Yeah. It's on paper it does not look like a good matchup. That Philadelphia's pass defense isn't great, but it sounds like you're saying that they've improved lately.
I think so. I think they've improved a lot lately. And I guess another factor, who knows? And I'm not going to say that I have any way of knowing this, but I wouldn't be 100% shocked if Schwartz has a few more blitzes called up in this game and is a little maybe a little bit more aggressive because they have nothing to lose, and they sometimes will do that in these bigger games. And so, yeah, I think they've played better. I really do. But yeah, it's a terrible matchup for the Eagles, no doubt about it. But then again, very few people, I think, in the grand scheme, thought that we were going to go into Chicago and beat them. So, again, as an Eagles fan, we kind of just you look at it and you think, well, here's the reasons they could win. Here's the negatives, and then you just throw your hands up in the air and say, we'll see what happens with Nick Foles out there. I mean, you just, again, not that he in the Bears game had the one game-winning drive and the throw to Golden Tate there, but aside from that, he didn't look very good. But he somehow finds a way to win these big games. So again, yeah, there's that element of hope, and but again, seeing it in the playoffs, game after game with him. So this will be an interesting matchup because no doubt about it, Hall of Famer. I could see Drew Brees, going to the Super Bowl and winning it this year. But again, I think the Eagles will at least give him a game. I don't think you're going to see a 48-7 blowout. I think it's going to be a more interesting game than that. To put it, sort of politely, it should be a good game, despite the fact that it's that the Saints are heavily favored.
Yeah, Foles is the big X factor. Who knows? I mean, he just this is his time of the year apparently to excel. So
yeah, that's it.
Amazing.
I mean, that's it. It's just he's big game Nick. He just does it in the big situations again and again. So that's.
Thank you for keeping it family friendly.
Yeah, I prefer that nickname. It fits in anywhere. So.
Yes.
Hey. Sorry about that.
Even your dog knows what he's really called.
Yeah, he's Oh, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. I have my dog next to me, and she likes to chime in sometimes too. So it's okay.
1 second. Hold on. Hey. Yeah. Sorry about that.
No
well, hopefully you can edit out the dog barking there.
That's fine. But it's going to be really interesting. I agree. It's going to be a lot closer than 48-7, and you never know. You never know. It's Saints are heavily favored, but you never know what's going to happen. So we shall see. So
yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. When the Bears were marching down the field at the end of that game, I mean, I was shocked. I was shocked but not shocked when Foles and Golden Tate hooked up for the touchdown. But then the 2-point conversion, that was a whole thing. And then the field goal, I just thought for sure the game was over. Eagles season was done. And I was wrong. So, again, it just the kind of miracle has kept on rolling here. So we'll see. Why not? Why not get a win in New Orleans?
Exactly. All right, sir. Matt from 4th and 26 Pod. It's 4th and 26 Pod on Twitter. You guys are. I'm sure you guys on everywhere podcasts are. Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, I think so. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Yeah. Oh yeah. All right, sir. Thanks a lot, and maybe we'll talk next week. All right, man. Thanks. Thank you. It's the division round of the playoffs, and the Eagles visit the Saints. With me to talk about it is Bob Rose. He covers the Saints for Canal Street Chronicles, as well as a host of Bayou Blitz podcast. Bob, how you doing?
I'm very good, Joe. How about yourself?
Doing all right. So
good.
The Eagles and Saints played in November, and it was one of the most lopsided games ever, 48-7. Do the Eagles stand a chance in this game?
You know what, they do. And there's a lot of people, a lot of the New Orleans Saints fan base that are actually very worried about this game. And I'm of the philosophy that you cannot overlook any playoff opponent. And if you look back at the New Orleans Saints postseason history, it's not that lengthy, but still littered throughout their postseason history are a handful of torment and heartbreak. So I think that the New Orleans Saints fan base is just worried. As far as I think the Saints will handle their business on Sunday. I don't think it's going to be 48-7, and it wouldn't surprise me if it were a nail biter.
Yeah, but matchup wise, it looks very favorable for the Saints. Possibly, I mean, when you have the Eagles have a pretty lousy pass defense, and the Saints have Drew Brees. That's a big thing in their favor.
You're absolutely right. And on paper, that side of the on that side of the ball, the matchup definitely favors New Orleans. But I think that what has some people in the Saints circle a little bit worried, and perhaps what has some of the media pundits leaning towards Philadelphia in this game, is the fact that New Orleans struggled in their passing game so much down the stretch. While I think that there's a couple of reasons for that, one of those reasons becomes a moot point because New Orleans has basically had 2 weeks to rest. And Brees, who's going to be 40 years old just a couple of days after this playoff game is played, he's had 2 weeks to rest that arm, and I think that that's going to be big. I do look for the Saints to be extremely aggressive in the passing game early and take advantage of those injuries that the Eagles have back in their secondary because they're a talented pass rushing group, but like you pointed out, they have a poor pass statistical ranking just because of the injuries. They've been ravaged back in the secondary and especially at the cornerback position all year long.
That week off, I think, is so huge, and I think when you look at all the recent playoffs, it looks like the teams that get that bye week are benefit so much and usually go very far in the playoffs. So and I mean the Eagles were fighting for their lives. I mean they shouldn't have been there if Chicago's kicker can do anything. They would have they wouldn't have been in this game. So that has to help New Orleans so much, especially like you said with a veteran like Brees.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And, these teams, they play, of course, with an eye towards making the postseason. But their number one priority is to earn that bye week and get some rest for the players. Now, there's two schools of thought on this, as I'm sure you know. One school of thought is, you don't want to have too much rest for your players that they'll come out rusty. And the other school of thought is, and this is the one that the players and coaches abide by, we do want the rest. We do want our veterans to have fresh legs, or in the case of Brees, a fresh arm or a live arm coming into this. I think if you take a closer look at the teams that have had bye weeks, it's the inexperienced ones, as far as postseason experience, that typically come out a little bit flat. And New Orleans, they have a strong core of veteran leaders in that locker room. And even the young players, they've been there before because this is their second straight postseason for a lot of these players. So yeah, I don't think that they'll come out flat at all. I think the bye week can only do this team well. Rest some injuries along the offensive line. Drew's arm, a player like Kamara, who looked frankly to me like he wore down a little bit down the stretch. I look for him to have fresh and live legs. I expect the Saints to come out humming in this one right off the bat.
Yeah. Now, one big difference between that Week 11 game and this one is the quarterback for the Eagles. Now they have Nick Foles, and he has seemed to have been on fire, just like he was on fire last playoffs. Is there any concern about how he's going to do?
Absolutely, and Foles is playing some outstanding football, and as he showed last season, and of course last week, he does not shy away from the postseason spotlight. He really has the ability to step it up. Now, as far as schematically, the difference between Foles and Carson Wentz tends to hold on to the ball a lot longer, and go through his reads down the field, looking to make plays down the field. And as a result, the Eagles' offensive line it's above average. I'll say that. But with Wentz holding on to the ball, that leaves him free and vulnerable to more sacks and more heavy pressure. And that's one of the ways that the Saints defense was so successful against Philadelphia's offense in Week 11. Foles, on the other hand, he doesn't hesitate to throw his ball up to receivers for a 50-50 ball, as they say. He has some tall targets in Zach Ertz at tight end, Alshon Jeffrey and Nelson Aguilar. And he won't hesitate to throw the ball up into coverage to them. Nick gets rid of the ball a lot faster. And if his first or second read isn't there, he'll tuck it under and run. or he'll go to a check down and he'll,